What's up, guys? It's Wolf with the Quarantine, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game by the name of the Daedalus Sentence by Eagle Griffin Games. Now, the Daedalus Sentence is a cooperative 1 to 4 player game. There is a competitive 1 versus all 5 player variant, and the box states that it plays 45 to 60 minutes, which I'd say is about accurate, and it's recommended for 10 plus, which I would say is actually a little bit high, but for the most part about accurate. So what is the Daedalus Sentence? Well, the Daedalus Sentence is a game that, like I mentioned, a fully cooperative game that the players are imprisoned in a hive, in an alien hive, and your goal is to get everybody out. But the kicker is, the map that you're playing on is constantly twisting and turning, and everything's constantly changing. So let's just go straight over to how the game's played, shall we? Alright. Before I get started, I do have to state, as usual, this is a review, it is not a tutorial. So if I skip some rules, or if I mess any up, just know this should still give you a basic idea of how the game is played, so you can determine whether or not the game is right for you. Alright, this is basically the Daedalus Sentence setup, ready to be played. Now, you're going to wind up building this board, and there are a few requirements, aside from, of course, it has to go blue, red, yellow, green. But some of the other requirements is the purple room has to be directly across from the blue room, and then everything else is basically random. When it comes to the blue, yellow, blue, red, yellow, green rooms, you are going to separate out the pieces like this, and you're going to find the pieces that have these. You're going to shuffle those together for each one of these. You'll remove 2 of them from each color, and then add those to the general supply, shuffle all those up, and then put them out. So that way you should have 2 tiles from each tier that isn't actually used. These are the element of randomness, I guess you can call it. So this one, for example, is not in play. So once you've got all that set up, you're going to set out your alert board. You're going to put the little red marker on tier 1. You'll put the cards face up, covering all of those spaces. This gives you, forewarns you what's going to happen at the end of the round, which will make sense in a minute. And you'll shuffle the deck real nice and good. You do that, shuffle the deck actually before you do that, and afterwards you're going to give each player 2 cards, and then depending on the number of players, you're going to give each player action cubes, as many as the book states that each player would get. And then the game goes ahead, and you go ahead and play the game. Now, when you take your turn, there is no structured turn order. The players take their turns, and you can take your turn whenever. You would just go, okay, I'm going to get rid of this cube and take such and such action. So the actions you're allowed to take are actually on the bottom of your player board. So this is one I'm not using. You have a special power that only your guy gets to have. So for example, Baxter, his maximum hand size is 2 larger than the maximum for other players, so that's pretty cool, because you have a maximum hand limit based on also the number of players. And then you have your general actions down here that you could just always take. Then you have location actions, climb through vents, blah 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 blah, and unless something says otherwise, all of these only take 1 action cube, except for draw 1 card takes 2 action cubes. So up here, what's her name, Jamie, can go, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and move, and I'm going to take a cube off, but at the same time, Audrey can also go, well, I'll also go ahead and move, and so there's no structured turn order. You just take your actions and remove a cube off of your board. So let's go over what some of these actions are. You can discover a room. If you are adjacent to a room, and you are at a door, which each one of the prison cells are considered a door, because you see a little tiny door right there. If you are, again, adjacent to an uncovered room, which is face down, or at an area with a door, you can spend a cube and say, Jamie is going to discover a room. So she's adjacent to this room and this room because her tile is touching both of them. So you could go ahead and uncover one of these. Now, this is an interesting one to discover right now. This is a locked door. If you reveal one of these, you will take the appropriate symbol. You will then put it face up this way to show that you still need 2 locks. I will get into what that does in a minute, but for the time being, whatever the number is that shows, you're going to take that many cards, flip them over, and you'll put it somewhere near the board so everybody knows that there's a locked room and that's what's required to be unlocked. But let's go ahead and continue. Audrey is also, say, going to go ahead and uncover a room here. And then she's also going to take a cube off and she's going to move into that room. And then, you know, Clay will also remove a cube to uncover this. And maybe he'll uncover a room to also move on to it. But let me kind of backtrack a little bit. Some of the cubes or tiles have a little symbol like this on it. So when you see that symbol, you will take one of the bad guys and you will place it on that tile. Now that tile can't be moved into, and if an enemy moves onto your tile at all, you're considered captured and you go back to jail. So in this case, he can't really go here. You know, I removed a cube for him to move, but in this case he can't. But he's adjacent to this room, and he's also adjacent to this room over here because of where his tile's at. So he can go ahead and move here. And then, okay, he's gonna, you know, so he took his cube off. He'll also remove another cube to explore this room. Alright, that's, you know, doesn't have anything special on it. I'll explain some of these rooms in a minute. He also takes another cube off to get a little further away from the alien that's in this space. Then of course Jamie's going to do her thing. She's going to come out and she's going to move here and, you know, so on and so forth. So you understand kind of how these all work. The actions that you have, the general actions, is you can discover a room, you can move, you can pass cards, meaning if you are in the same space as a teammate, you can hand cards off to each other, you can eliminate a guard, and you can draw one card. So let's go over how some of these work. So if you have a Minotaur card, which is what this guy is, you can play this card as, of course, one of your action cubes. You can play it and kill a single Minotaur. So when he was still in his room, he could have, instead of, you know, moving all the way over there, he could have went, I'll go ahead and spend one of my action cubes, I will play this into the discard pile and kill this guy. So we kill that guard. You also have locust cards, or locte cards, I think is how it's pronounced. You have locte cards. They can kill 3 of the, what are they, Minotaurs, or they can kill 1 locte, which I'll get to those things in a minute. So these are super powerful cards. You could also play these cards here to unlock rooms. So let's go to what that means. Alright, so in order to unlock this door right here, as you see, we need 1 monster and we need a rainbow. This is actually kind of a bad example, so we'll put that out. There we go. So in order to unlock this door, this basically is a wild card. You can use anything. So it's a bad example, but in this case, collectively, we would need to be in this space, and you can discard either a monster card, doesn't matter which one, just a monster card, and you can either discard a red card or you can discard a number 1 card. So you can do either or. So in our case, let's say somebody had these in their hand. They can go ahead and discard both of these because it's red and a monster. So we can discard both of these. The lock is broken. We would take this off the board and it is now completely unlocked. Or you can just put it there showing it's unlocked if you wanted to. We usually just take it off the board just so we know. But once this unlocks, you can now start exploring the outer ring and so on and so forth. And that's basically how exploring works. Now, I'm going to backtrack to some of these rooms. Some of the players, you can give them this little quick reference cardboard thing here. And it has, you know, how the phases all work and, you know, what happens if you're captured and what happens at the game end. And then it has room icon overlays and explains what all these rooms do, which has more, like a more elaboration over here, like what ventilation ducts do, the gate rooms do, so on and so forth. So you're going to be referencing this quite a bit, and you're going to go, okay, well, this room right here, you look at that, and you compare it with this, and you go, okay, what does that look like? That looks like it's a control room. Alright, well, what does the control room do? Control room, manipulate the hive rotation, replace 1 card in top row of the Theus deck with a card in your hand. So you can spend an action cube to do that instead. So I'm not going to go into what all of these rooms do, but you have your little quick reference here that does that for you. And I mean, it works well enough. The game is going to continue, and I'll go on to this phase in just a minute, but the game's going to continue until one of two things happen. Either everybody gets out of the prison, which there's an exit gate somewhere around here at the bottom, which looks like, I don't think it actually shows it on here, but it's just a giant door. Once everybody gets out, you win. If anybody gets captured a second time, then it's just game over. So the game's going to proceed that way. So let's go on to, after everybody's taken all their actions, all their action cubes are now off of their character sheet, then you go ahead and you move to phase 3. Because phase 1, you update the Theus, which is that, which I'll get to. Then you go to phase 2 where you take your actions, and you go to phase 3 where you do the hive prison actions. So that's where this comes into play. So let's go ahead and bring this a little closer here. So the way this works is whatever level, the furthest out that you are, this little red thing is going to be over that level, and that's what's going to be activating essentially. So the top row is going to affect the rotation of these cubes. See, so the whole thing kind of rotates, or not cubes, tiles. The bottom is going to be guard patrols. So because in our case here, let's put him there. In our case here, we are only on the blue level, so we're only on red alert 1. So the green level is going to rotate counterclockwise by 1. On this board, there's these little divots right here, and you would go counterclockwise 1 divot. That's how that would rotate, and I'm kind of messing my cards up here. So then this would be removed off the board, and then you move down here. Now normally, if you had something like this down here, then all enemies on the green area would also rotate 1 clockwise in this case. So if you had a bad guy here, well, you can't see that very well, bad guy here, he would rotate counterclockwise and move to here instead. And they're slowly going to go around the board. But if you ever have a monster card in either the top or bottom, you are going to spawn that monster in a random location. So what'll happen in our case is you're going to, there's 1 Minotaur, you will draw a single card. So you will spawn one in the green circle. So you will go to the green room and go down on the green to the green circle in this case. So because that would be right here, that's what would spawn. So if this wound up rotating similar to this, and we got, I don't know, let me grab another bad guy out here. We pulled another card here, another guy, that's a bad example. We got a red. So what would happen is you would go to the red, and you would go down to the red zone, which would be right here. In this case, there are 2 spaces that are, it's split right down the middle here, and you would always go to the furthest counterclockwise, so it would go there instead. And that's how that would work. So these are going to constantly be moving around the board. The board's also going to kind of be spinning like this and back and forth, kind of messing things up. You're going to have vents that pop out. You have these guys here will always stay, like this guy will always stay on the green circle, and he'll just kind of pace back and forth. Then you have these guys, the Loktai, which are the really smart ones and the really powerful ones. They actually always spawn right here in the blue room, and they will chase the characters. Then, you know, they'll move out to the door, go through a door, come back over here, find the other door, move out, and they'll come and find you, and they will hunt you down. So these guys are kind of a pain to work with. But that's basically the game, and I know I kind of threw a lot out there, but there's quite a bit to the game. But once you've done all that and you've finished phase 3, then you go back to phase 1. And all phase 1 is you take all these cards, you scoot it, oh, this needs to be discarded, you scoot them all over, and then you draw more cards. So that way you're able to see ahead of time probably what's going to happen. So you're going to be able to manipulate these cards and kind of see what happens. But the further this goes back, so if you're on, you know, phase 3, all of these are going to be taken away, so you only know what the next 2 actions are going to be. So it kind of makes things a little harder to plan the further the game goes on. These would come off, fly back here, and you'll fill up all these. And then you proceed to do the same thing over and over again. And there's a few other things that I haven't mentioned yet. Like you have these player tokens here, and when somebody gets captured, you're going to, so like, what's her name? Jamie, there we go. If Jamie were to get captured, you would take this, you would flip it over, and you would put it over here. And now the entire group has lost Jamie's ability completely. So her ability is she can discover rooms through vents. You have these little, I don't feel like having to try to find one here. You have vents that are kind of scattered everywhere, kind of like this, that normally you'd be allowed to move through, which are really good if you have bad guys that are blocking a door. But you can't explore through a vent, however Jamie can. So if she gets captured, nobody gets to use vents anymore at all. And so if this guy gets captured here, you no longer get to manipulate these cards at all. Or, this guy here, you no longer get to swap cards anymore, so on and so forth. So as people get captured, the game just starts getting harder and harder. And then if you're captured, somebody has to, if you're, say, way out here on the green level, somebody gets captured, somebody's got to go all the way back here and let them out of their cell so they can come back out, because you're only allowed to leave your cell by yourself as your first action, because of course there's nothing else you can do. Well, your first turn, sorry. So once you go back to jail, you got to stop what you're doing, come all the way back here, let them back out, and then make your way back here through all these hordes of enemies. And that's why you have to abuse these vents, and you have to abuse rotating these tiles. Oh, that was weird. But rotating these tiles back and forth, and looking ahead of the, looking ahead, seeing where enemies are going to wind up moving, and so on and so forth. Now, there's a few things, other things I haven't touched on. You also have, like I mentioned, the 5th player variant, where somebody gets to play as the bad guy. They get a cool little player board as well. You can also make the game harder by, if I can get these out here, oh, I'm dropping things. You can also make the game harder by implementing dice to the game, which just start adding all kinds of craziness, which use these little symbols up here that you may or may not have noticed. I'm not going to get into all that, I'll let you discover that by yourself. But you have several different variants of the game. But overall, that is basically how you play the Daedalus sentence. So let's just go to my final thought, shall we? Alright, the Daedalus sentence. Well, I'll go ahead and start off by saying I do enjoy the Daedalus sentence. The game is actually really fun. It's very light and very simple to learn. And the fact that it's fully cooperative is great, and it's actually fairly tense and complex with how light it is. And I know that's kind of an oxymoron there, but it is. The game has a surprising amount of depth for how light it is. And then this board is just really cool. The fact that the whole thing, moves, and I keep dropping pieces, but the whole thing, slides around, and that's really cool. And I don't know why it keeps doing that, because none of these pieces actually catch when I'm spinning them around. I think it's the angle that I'm holding this in or something. But normally none of these move around very smooth. I haven't had any problems with that. However, after repeated plays, I can definitely foresee it's going to wear these tiles, so that might be an issue for tomorrow. But overall, the game's really cool. And then the fact that if you get captured a second time, it's game over for everybody, and you don't want to be that person that causes everybody to lose. And with the multi-function cards, you're using those to unlock the doors, but you're also using them to manipulate the hive using specific rooms that allow you to swap cards with your hands. And it's a really cool game. It becomes like these really complicated situations where you're like, well, here's our plans, this is what we need to do for the next couple turns, and then you finish out that turn, and then the next wave of cards completely invalidates everything that you planned. And it sucks, but it's cool, because you're like, well, now we're going to have to go through this huge group of bad guys, and I can't deal with them. So now you guys are having to readjust all your plans around the way the board is moved, or maybe the patrols have moved in a position you didn't need them to, and so on and so forth. And that aspect is great. However, the game does have some pretty big shortcomings. The first one, and in my opinion the biggest one, is its price point. So if you have seen my channel and watched any of my other reviews, you understand that I don't mind dropping a large sum of money on a game if it's worth it. One of my favorite games is Kingdom Death Monster, and that is a considerably expensive game. But I feel, if I get bang for my buck, Kingdom Death Monster, you get a ton of really high quality minis, lots of cardboard, lots of card, beautiful artwork, so on and so forth. You know, a lot of cool Mini or Knots games. You know, Blood Rage, you get lots of cardboard, you get really good quality miniatures, so on and so forth. And that was, I don't remember how much that one was, but you get a lot of quality. So if I'm paying $150 for a game, I'm expecting Fantasy Flight or, you know, Cool Mini or Not or something equivalent to that in terms of quality. Now, this board is cool. I really like this board. These move real smooth. Very rarely do I have one of these pieces pop up. You know, that's cool. There's going to be some probably wear on the tiles, but that's tomorrow's problem, you know, after a while. But that's cool. And I understand that's expensive to make. There's no press that just pumps these out like standard game boards. You know, you got to find somebody to custom make that, and I get that. And even with that in mind, you know, this is cool. This is solid. These cardboard pieces are solid. They're pretty thick. You know, that's the thickness of all of the cardboard. It's pretty thick. You know, all of the cards seem to have like a linen finish on it. You know, you got a little deck of cards and a bunch of cardboard. Not a whole lot, which I'll get to. But the problem comes to these miniatures. That does not say $150 to me. You know, there's that. Here's a Survivor miniature. That's not $150 quality. Like that's if this game was $60, I'd tell you to run out and get it right now, because you know I would be okay with that, because what you get with $150, you get this really cool board. What you see here, all these room pieces, you get this, but then there's 2 extra red, 2 extra yellow, 2 extra green, because those are the ones you have to randomly take out. So that's what you get. You get that alert board. You get a deck of, I'm wanting to say it's like 60 cards or something like that. You get a couple dozen of these guys. You get, I want to say it's like 6 or 8 of these guys. You get these Survivor minis, which there's, I want to say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 of these. And then you get the player boards, the little room tokens, this little thing here to show what your alert level is. Like something like 20 of the little blue cubes and 3 dice for the variant. That's what you get for $150. You do, however, get this really cool insert that sits down in it to hold everything. That's kind of steep, in my opinion. You may not have a problem with $150, but to me, that's a considerable sum of money for not a lot of bang for my buck. So again, that's going to be very subjective, but it's something I feel that I should address. The other thing is the size of the game. Now, this is a pretty big board. You got to store this board. And to do so, they made a ridiculously large box. Like, look at the size of that. That is insane. And storing this, when I put it on my shelf, and I have just normal bookshelves here, but as you can see, it stores everything pretty well. When I put this on my shelf, this much of it is sticking out. And it's ridiculous. Now, another reviewer that I watched had referenced Star Trek Fleet Captains, which I have right here. I love Star Trek Fleet Captains, and this box is also really big. However, I'm going to post a picture here in a minute that shows this in comparison to the Daedalus sentence. And the Daedalus sentence is way bigger than Star Trek Fleet Captains. I can store Fleet Captains on my shelf, and this much of it sticks off. Still a little annoying, but not really that big of a deal. I can deal with that. When I have this much of a box sticking off of a shelf, that's a tripping hazard, and that's going to damage other games around it when you hit it by mistake and it jars the other games, stuff like that. So that may not be a deal breaker for you, and I don't want to say it should be, but it also should be, if that makes sense, because you know, storage of your games, you know, if you're like me, you have a considerable investment in your games here, and you want to keep them in good condition, and you want to be able to store them properly, and so on and so forth. When you have just this obscenely large box that you can't put anywhere and keep it, you know, secure, that's kind of an issue. Now, in my opinion, and again, I'm not a game designer. I mean, I'm designing a game, but I'm not a published game designer. I don't understand why they couldn't have made this in 2 pieces. You snap it together. Maybe it wasn't going to spin quite as well. But it would have been way more reasonable to actually store this. And honestly, that's a huge problem for me. But again, it might not be an issue for you. It's just something I feel needs to be addressed. The last thing being, and this one was really annoying, is there's a lot of discrepancies in the book. The book very frequently starts talking about when you're going through the rules, and it's like, you know, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and you got to do this. And then it starts referring to things that you do way later in the book that it starts addressing. So you're constantly having to flip back and forth. Which, if you play a lot of games like me, that's not that big of a deal. But when you combine that with a lot of things that are very vague and don't really explain, like it never talks about when do you go ahead and spawn enemies on these rooms, even if they're not revealed, and then move them around. It never really addresses that from what we saw, and I had a couple other people look at it as well. They couldn't find it. Maybe we're wrong. That is entirely possible. I'm not perfect when it comes to learning games. But there's a lot of little things like that that it never really specifies in the rules, so you wind up having to just either guess or look online and see what other people talk about and stuff like that, and there's just a lot of vagueness to the rules, and they're super annoying. So that's another issue that we had, which it sounds like I'm bashing the game, and I am a little bit, because the game is really cool. The game is awesome. Everybody that I played with loved the game. We've played this several times, and it's a lot of fun. And then I tell them the price point, and they go, oh, there's no way. And that's pretty much universally in my groups, because I played with a couple different groups, everybody pretty much came to that same determination of like, there's no way that I would pay that much money for this. Like, I'd pay $60 tops, and that's going to be a higher end of maybe. But overall, the game is really good. If you can find it used or something like that, I recommend pick it up. The game is fun. It's just the things that I mentioned are kind of big issues. So that is my review for the Daedalus sentence. If you like my channel, check me out on Patreon up here in the corner. I will also have my Twitch and my Twitter down in the description as well. If you want to follow those, that would be pretty sweet. Anyways, I will see you guys next time in the quarantine.